how do you feel like it's going in terms of communication? How should companies approach this topic? How do they manage the world of dispatch with their field teams?
If I can be completely transparent, I don't know. That's the answer. Um, it's madness for us. It's been madness for 5.5 years. What I'll start with is I think we're very fortunate in that you and I are very similar. So this doesn't bother us as much right now. It's
As much as
starting,
our wives.
right. It's starting to
Yeah.
bubble up to where it is because we're getting even more busy. But we are fortunate in the sense that we have employees that also haven't complained too much about the burden of how much we ask them to communicate every day. I was actually thinking about this yesterday. Um, that like I don't care how much my phone goes off or how much folks are asking for me to like electronically communicate, email, text, WhatsApp, whatever. But I would say I'm in the minority in that regard. Like most of the world, they probably prefer texting over phone calls, but they don't prefer to text all day long.
Yeah.
Like they don't want their little fingers going like this. So I get it. Your
I mean, I
sentiment.
have, dude, I have days where at the end of the day, you and I have texted so many times with our guys that this joint right here is literally swollen and it hurts.
Well,
I'm
that's you
like,
just
I've got to stop it.
you got to get on the workout plan. You don't do the ball crunches and what.
No, man, I gotta start working this baby. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's the one part of our business that I don't have a great answer for. And I think if we had the fortune of seeing how other specifically junk removal companies operate, I think you're going to get a smorgasbord of different models that people have in play. So like for a large franchise company like 1-800 Got Junk, I'm sure it looks a lot like what you mentioned. They've got a
Yeah.
dedicated call center. The field team never answers phone calls. Everything gets routed through that call center, and the field team maybe only gets pulled in if it's like a very unique request or it's a large job and the customer won't agree to an on-site, but 1-800 Got Junk really wants to get the job, so they may pull in a local team to be like, hey, let's at least get an estimate here to see if we can get this customer to agree to have us come out. So I do think that's one model is bypassing the field altogether, having a dedicated call center or person if you're on the small side, you only do single location operation, managing everything and leaving the giving them the autonomy to price jobs how they see fit, and hopefully that works out. You get enough on the books, and we get on site, and the close percentage is high. But you and I both know that's why we don't do it is because
Yeah.
there's so many nuances to this industry that if we tried to play the hands off model at least too early with new folks we bring in, our business is going to suffer, right? I mean, I can just run through the examples in my head right now of things that would be very negative for our business. You turn over the phones to somebody after, you train them for a week or two and you think they're good, and they start turning down jobs because they don't think we do it, or they start, trying to give out estimates over the phone that are way out of whack, or they start to they don't give customers anything that they need. Every phone call they answer is like, "Oh, I'm new here. Let me get back to you," and then that lead's gone. We both know it. Like speed to quote, speed to get on site, all that stuff is imperative in this business. So my answer is I don't know. I think it matters very kind of context matters and where you're at with your business. How many trucks do you have? How many guys do you have? How many locations? Do you have anybody that is dedicated to the phones? What are you trying to get to? For us, it's we have a dedicated team, and that's you and I and a few others, and we're trying to get to a franchise model where we have a lot of locations, and so we know that how we do it today is unsustainable. So we have to think of other ways to go about it. But um, I don't know. I guess the long and short of it is that it's a massive problem, likely for many firms that are not the one man show, not the one man shops. I'll go in these Facebook groups and I'll see guys comment about, oh, I'm booked out 3 weeks in advance, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense in this
Yeah.
business. Anybody that's allowing you to book them 2 or 3 weeks in advance for a junk removal job is just pulling your leg. Like, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
say, like they're not waiting that long to get the Just call the next guy. Um, but I think that's the
But
key is where you're at in your business.
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that? Kevin Hayford, he and I talk now almost every day. We text back and forth. Part of why my thumb is always sore. But, Kevin is one of those guys in such a unique market. I mean, he is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, in the middle of nowhere. And yet, I think population in his immediate area is like 20,000 people. If you expand that maybe another 5, 10 miles, I think he said it's like 70,000 people, but still, it's not a big market. The big cities to him are like an hour away. And yet, in his local market, he is like one of maybe two people in his area. And so that guy, he's busy all the time. I mean, he just was texting me this morning. Like he's booked usually 1 to 2 weeks out and he doesn't get a lot of cancellation. So I think
That's
for
the bummer.
context, that's it. I think that's exactly right. I think if you're in a small rural, that's always been a weird word for me, but if you're in a small market and you're maybe the only player or one of a few, it's very different. It's much easier. When
Yeah.
you are like us and you're in Charlotte and you're one of like hundreds, when you count the individual truck and trailer guys that we see everywhere, everywhere. And this industry, this business has exploded in growth over the last few years. I don't know where I part of me blames Lee Godbold from Junk Doctors because I think he's done such a good job at Rascal. Of all places, he had to be. He had to be in our same market, but he's done a great job, I think, spreading the word. But it does seem like in the last few years, there's been, in fact, I know there is just from Google search trends, there's been an explosion in guys getting in this business. So when you're in a market like ours, it is tough. And I think that's where you're right. You have to be much more responsive. It's tough to book people out far in advance because we see it. They cancel all the time. We had yesterday was a great example. 4 out of 9 jobs canceled. I mean, that was very anomalous, of course, but it's still weird. So let me ask you this, because this is what one of the things Marilee asked me is,
Well, let me mention this before you
yeah,
move on. To more context, back to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, the culture makes a difference too. Somebody in Oshkosh, Wisconsin calls one of two junk removal companies and they want their garage cleaned out, and somebody's like, "Oh, maybe 200 to 300 bucks," and the next guy's like, "Oh, it's 250 to 350 for us." That person, if both of those companies say, "I can get you on for this time next Friday," that person in Oshkosh is probably fine with it. They may be jumping for joy because they don't have much going on. Like
that's
the
true.
culture is that it's a slower way of life. I'm assuming in Oshkosh. I don't know. I don't want to make that assumption, but
Could be
smaller
hopping.
town,
Yeah.
smaller town USA. Like, I mean, get out to like, up into like Statesville here. That's kind of local to Charlotte or, just other remote parts of the state. They are probably okay with that, and they're not going to, necessarily go shop around. In Charlotte, it's very tech driven, much more of a 2023 way of living. Like we're all hustling and bustling. So if they have a need and they want food on their doorstep, and Postmates is going to take an hour, but Uber Eats is going to take 30 minutes, Uber Eats is getting the business, just like junk removal. If you can get
Yeah.
here today, but you're 50 bucks more expensive than the next guy, I'm taking you today.
Yeah.
That's just the
That's
cultural
right.
difference,
That is
city to
exactly what I told her this morning. But she then turned around and asked me, she's like, but have you guys ever tried the 1-800 model where you just try to book jobs? There's no texting, there's no pictures. I was like, we do it every day,
Well,
not intentionally.
what I wanted to say to
Yeah.
that, that would be a phenomenal model. That would take a lot of burden off of us and our guys. But what I would say to that is 1-800 Got Junk likely has at least four different territories in the Charlotte market.
Yeah.
So they can do that where, if you own South Charlotte as the franchisee, your trucks are not going to 10 different estimates on that day that are all 50 miles from each other. There may be 5 or 10
Yeah.
miles from each other. So if you go to 10 and you lock in 5, that's a good return. Like, and you
Mm.
didn't waste, 5 hours of your day driving to all these estimates. Like you spent maybe a couple hours driving to estimates, and the other 6 hours you actually booked the jobs and got to do them. That's the other piece. Like, so for us, where we don't have franchisees that take up this territory, we're covering all the way from Statesville and Salisbury all the way down to Fort Mill and Clover, South Carolina. We did a job in today.
Yeah.
So we
True.
can't physically go and trust that we're going to, get on site and close we physically can't do as many estimates as 1-800 Got Junk because we have to travel further to cover the radius that we cover.
Yeah. On top of that, though, again, context is key. The other thing to remember is with a company like 1-800 that has such a big company, how much of their business comes from commercial? A lot. A
Yeah.
lot. When you're a smaller junk removal company, when you're locally owned, the odds are most of these guys, in fact, because I'm on these Facebook groups like you, that's one of the holy grails. That's Bigfoot. Everyone goes, man, I hear about commercial accounts, but how do you get them? Well, one reason it's so hard to get them is because those big companies have them locked up. Junk Luggers, 1-800, Junk King, those guys have locked down most of those big companies. So whether that's, you know, Target, Costco, you name it, those big companies do outsource a lot of that bulk stuff to those companies. But those big companies, they've been around for a long time. They have a national footprint. That's the other thing you got to remember is the odds that you're going to go to corporate, if you're a small guy here in Charlotte or in Oshkosh, the odds that you're going to call corporate for Costco and land a national account, because remember, they don't want you to just do that one there in Oshkosh. They want you to service all of them all over the United States, hopefully. So if you can't do that, therein lies the challenge, because then in comes 1-800 who says, hey, we've got a global presence, not just national, a global presence. That makes a massive difference. But to finish that thought that I was saying, what I was telling her is we have done that model. In fact, we do it every single day. When the customer can't send pictures or doesn't want to. If someone either does not have pictures, and it happens all the time, I'm not at home right now, I'm calling on behalf of my mom, I live in another state. That happens all the time. We don't have pictures. So we do just show up and do those estimates on site. However, it's riskier. To your point, we've seen that so many times where we take the risk, we get out there, we assess the job, and they're like, oh my goodness, that's quadruple what I expected to hear. Well, that's why we like to get pictures so that we don't waste your time or ours. We try to level set expectations. I'd rather you say no quickly and we move on.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I'll mention is it does 100% matter what you think about your business and the customer experience. Like if we didn't really care about a bad review or if somebody got pissed at us, then we would do that model. We would have done this a
True.
long time ago. Let's try to get on site, we'll talk basically through our, on a basic level through how we price stuff on initial phone calls. But our goal on that call is to get on site and price it there. Don't worry about sending pictures. Don't, worry about, trying to get a price for your job. We'll tell you how we price. It's based on truckload, and here's our standard pricing for an eighth of a truck all the way up to a full truck. But Mr. Customer, we want to get on site, no obligation. We're going to get on site and give you a price. But I think our MO has always been we don't want to lead a customer on in the wrong direction. So we want to
Yeah.
at least get you an estimate up front, to have something to compare against once we do get on site. That's why we always ask for photos if we can. But like, you know, and I'm not, again, I have no clue because I don't sit at the board of 1-800 Got Junk or any of these other larger ones that do the model of just get on site. But like, if you don't really care about a 1-star review popping up every so often, then you'll do that model. And that person, at 1 out of 20 folks will get pissed and, they'll go on and leave a bad review. For us, we don't really want to risk that. That's why we try to be so transparent on our phone calls with the customers to say, hey, like, and it's also protecting our time. We don't want to just, again, send our trucks out on estimates if, we're getting bad leads, like folks that think junk removal's free or we're going to actually pay them for, like, we want to get all the bad customers out as quickly as we possibly can, just like we want to get all the good ones in as quickly as we can. But it takes some nurturing and some questioning and just a sales process to get there. So it's
Yeah.
tough.
Well, I think for me, the summary is it's very personal, meaning from your business to mine, you may have a different methodology, and that's okay. The trick is finding something that works for your business. What can you sustain? What can you maintain? What doesn't drive your guys crazy? My answer to Marilee was, look, the managers understand this is part of why they're in management. This is part of why they get paid more than the other guys, frankly, is because they have more responsibility. Right. So part of their job is to make sure that we're seeing these leads coming in. They're a part of the process for helping us scope out the price. And they're involved in really that entire process, not just on the front end, not just, hey, I've booked a job and put it on the calendar, but they're also involved in helping us to make sure that, again, can we accommodate that job? Do we have room on the truck? You have to be cognizant of when the landfills close. You can't always empty your truck in time and get back there and do that job. So For us, 5.5 years in, we feel like we get it, right? We understand the process. And that's also why it's difficult to just turn this over to a VA, a virtual assistant, which we've looked at. We've hired other people and they just never work out because they're not as good. Their closing rate is not nearly as good. We close the vast majority of our customers. If someone calls and they are seriously wanting to get that job done, you and I are very good at getting that business. And I think that's another piece of it is make sure that when you're scoping out your method, your process, that you don't just put anyone on the phone just to alleviate you, because if you do, you're going to kick yourself very quickly when you realize that your conversion rate is going to fall.
Well, those outsourced call centers, like to no fault of their own, they just don't know what they don't know about your specific business. They don't know how many jobs you have today on the books. And even if they have a view into your schedule, they don't know all the nuances that have taken place even just within that day, right? Like
Yeah.
there's been so many communication with our field team just today about, hey, this person canceled, or hey, this person's job is twice what we thought it would be. I'm going to be here for another 4 hours. Or hey, you put the wrong address in the system and now I got to go 30 minutes back this way. Virtual assistants and outsourced call centers don't have that knowledge. So if all they
Yeah.
were doing was taking calls and booking estimates, our guys would get pissed because
Yeah.
you're screwing up the schedule and you're setting them up for having to deal with a pissed off customer face to face when they finally get on site. That's why, I mean, there's so many nuances here, including, I mean, the landfills is a great example. Like they have knowledge in the field that we don't have in the call center, which means there has to be communication almost at all times. So how do you solve for that? It's a great question.
Let me ask you this, because one of the other things Marilee threw out there, and I love the fresh perspective. That's why I like asking her some of these questions. Like, what would you do? You and I think, are desensitized. Sometimes you get so entrenched in your own routine. Sometimes it's hard to see outside of that. So she was like, well, why don't you just call them more? Why text all the time? Because that phone is going off. They're driving. Isn't it easier for them to just answer a call? That way they can still safely drive versus having to text. And I'm like, yeah, listen, sometimes we do. Sometimes that is more effective, especially if they don't respond to a text. But keep in mind, if they are in the middle of a job, answering the call is not any easier than answering a text, in my opinion. Because I mean, I've been on the truck, I've worked these jobs, I understand exactly what they're doing. And we understand if you're in the middle of a job, we're not asking you to put the couch down in the middle of the staircase that you're walking up or down and answer our call or respond to a text. We get that. But within a reasonable amount of time, just take a look at your phone. And if we are asking a question where we need your feedback, please respond in a timely manner. She's like, okay, if not a phone call, why not do something even more like have something in the truck, like those, what are the cameras that have the two-way communication built in? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that could work. That would be interesting. So I've
They're
seen
not
where a
always in the
lot of
truck.
those, where what?
They're not always in the truck.
That's the other
Like
problem. That's the other problem. Yeah. So my point is, again, this has to be something you solve on a personal basis. Your business may be different than ours, and your market may be different. But for us, we're telling you the model that we have found that works best. So, in summary, I don't like the model like 1-800, and maybe they're not using that, to be fair. Maybe they're not using that as much or like they used to. But when we looked into this fairly recently, they were still doing that model. And we like the model where the customer sends a picture, we look at it, we give them a broad price range. I mean, sometimes the price range minimum maybe 150. We'll say it could be as much as 500. Why? Because we can't see under that tarp. We can't see under those boxes. Is it concrete and construction debris, or is it feathers? Is it clothes? That stuff really matters, right? When you move that box or that tarp and it's full of concrete or bricks, that's going to obliterate the price if you said 150. So we try to give wide ranges to cover our bases, but in summary, that's what we think. We think the best model is to try to get a text if you can. You can't always, but try to get a text with the picture from the customer so you can see it. Give them a price range. It is more clunky. You're going to have to go back and forth with your teams at times. But if you do that, when you show up, you know that your guys can accommodate the job. You're not going, hey, it's going to cost this. The customer goes, great, let's do it. And you go, well, I'm going to have to come back. We've heard that a million times from other competitors because they can't do it. Their truck is full. They just went based on the schedule. That next job was booked, so they showed up and gave the price, but they can't do it. Now the customer's kind of annoyed. Well, you were here, you just gave me a price, I agreed. So now you're saying you got to come back tomorrow. We've poached a lot of business because of that.
Well, and the constant communication with field teams spans even outside of just asking them their feedback on quotes. Like we have a lot of just internal business back and forth stuff that we need. Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but late last night I was just going through the system because I know that our guys aren't the greatest at this, and I was just checking some jobs inside our software stack that like we need this data to be clean and accurate. And these three
Mm.
jobs didn't have notes tied to them or they weren't closed out properly. So, we use our WhatsApp thread for that. And so that's not about me taking a customer call and not knowing how to price it or not knowing if we have enough room on the schedule to get it booked. I just need to ask my guys to go and clean up some system stuff. And so there's
Right.
all those types of tasks that require constant communication. And so if I'm sitting there, in my bed at 10 p.m. at night, I'm not going to pick up the phone and call TJ or Matt and be like, "Why didn't you close this job?" Like, I'm just going to put it out there. You respond to it when you can. The other part about getting it in writing versus phone calls is that it's in writing. And because the nature of the job is such that they're always on a job and moving quickly, or they're at the landfill, unload the truck, like calls get lost in translation, they get forgotten, but written communication, you can always go back to it. You can point to it and be like, "Hey, did you see this? You remember this?" Or I thought you guys mentioned we were going to circle like one from today. TJ last night was like, "Yeah, I'm going to call that guy tomorrow to see if we can actually get this job done another way." And I wanted to know if he had called that guy, so I can just go back up to that thread and click reply, and it refreshes his memory and everybody else. So getting stuff in writing versus phone calls is imperative in my opinion, but it can get overbearing if you have folks that really hate texting.
Yeah. Well, here's my final thought. My final thought is if you have great company culture where your people can tell you these things without you flying off the handle or getting offended or getting upset and it's my way or the highway, that to me is kind of the secret ingredient of all of this. If your guys do feel like they're getting burnt out with the constant back and forth, I hope you guys are providing a culture where they can tell you that. Right? That's the key in all this is make sure you have clear, open lines of communication between all of your people, not just your manager, but all of your team. You should be in constant communication with your team in a good way, not pesty, but they should always feel like they can come to you if they have an issue. In the past, we've used tools like 15.5 so that we can get that constant feedback from our guys. We have meetings every month. We have an end of month recap meeting every single month. Sometimes it's at an Airbnb, sometimes it's at a restaurant, but we do it every single month. And we always open it up for discussion at the end of that meeting. Is there anything you guys want to tell us? Good, bad, ugly. You don't have to just tell us everything's great. We love our job. If there's something bad, tell us that, including the communication. Are we driving you crazy? Do you guys have any ideas of how we can improve upon our current systems and processes? So that's my final thought, as along with I'd love to hear back from anyone that watches this, that's in this industry, that understands our pain points. Tell us how you have solved this, or what are you doing? Are you doing the same thing? Do you have a different model? What's working for you? What's not working? Let's talk about that. Any final thoughts, Davis?
Yeah, I would leave it with if somebody can figure out how to have a dedicated person that rides around with each crew member all day every
Mm,
day, and they don't do any jobs. They just handle the WhatsApp communication, but they have the intimate knowledge of what the truck is doing, like how full it is, what jobs they have left to do, where the landfills are, when they're going to close, and that person is the only person that communicates with the call center. That's how you solve it, but it requires you to hire a dedicated person to ride on the truck that has nothing to do with hauling junk. They're like an
yeah,
admin person in the field, basically.
yeah, no, very true. Well, great conversation as always. We look forward to hearing back from you guys, and we will see you next time. Davis, anything else?
Bye.
All right, see you guys.